Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen, too. I watched it to my communities.
Maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me.
All right, just last night, Americans watched Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Democratic Governor Tim Walz face off for the only vice presidential debate of this election. It was policy-focused and congenial with just a few exceptions.
And joining us now to discuss it all is Professor Stephen Caliendo of North Central College. Good morning. We always appreciate you joining us.
It's good to be here.
So generally, I think overall it's safe to say the tone of the debate was quite polite, maybe even civil, especially compared to last month's face-off between the two presidential candidates. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just that. I mean, it's been a while since we've had a debate that had this kind of tone. But those of us of a certain age, I would say, kids, come closer. This is how it can be. I mean, it can be like this, and it was real meaningful exchanges of ideas throughout. And there were moments, of course, that we'll talk about that were a little bit less. But if you were looking for excitement, this was not it.
Yes.
If you're looking for policy, this was a good one.
Yeah, it was substantive.
That's correct.
It really was.
Well, one thing that the two did spar about was Donald Trump's remarks about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. Let's have a listen to that moment.
That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said it's not true.
The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
That was an interesting one. Right, look, there was an interesting kind of rhetorical jiu-jitsu there that Vance was playing. And he did this a number of times. He said, I agree with you, and then went on to say something that he completely disagreed or an argument that he made. With respect to this, the immigrant issue in Springfield, they had to pivot because so much of the focus was on illegal immigration. These folks are there legally. So now it was, well, I'm most concerned about U.S. citizens, right? And so we're starting to see a little bit of a drift there. And then he was even pressed on the fact that they were legal at one point. He got upset. Vance got upset with the moderators. He said they fact-checked him. And then he went on to say, well, yeah, they are legal, but it's not the kind of legal that I like. So it was a very interesting, but he was very prepared. He was ready for all of it.
They both looked very prepared to me.
I think in some ways, Walz was over-prepared. I think he was trying to get particular phrases or avoid particular sound bites, specifically when they asked him about his exaggerations about his record. That was a real problem, I think, for Walz.
Maybe one of the most heated moments of the night was when Tim Walz confronted Senator Vance about whether Trump actually lost the 2020 election, as Trump claims that he did, which, by all accounts, that is, patently false. There's no court agreed with that in any situation. Let's show you that exchange.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It was a damning non-answer. And I'll tell you, one of the things that was interesting, we saw a lot of polish from J.D. Vance. I think he was on the debate team at Yale. He knows what he's doing there. This was a moment, it was right at the end, right? He got through like 89 minutes, but right at the end, he really fell apart. And that bite that we just showed there is going to be used over and over again in Kamala Harris ads and social media posts, et cetera, because he wasn't willing to say, just like President Trump wasn't willing to say at the last debate, I lost the election. President Trump lost the election. He just couldn't say it because his boss was watching.
And his boss continues to make those false claims.
That's correct.
Now, a flash poll after the debate by CBS News and YouGov found clear majorities thought that Walz did a better job talking about abortion and health care, while some smaller majorities preferred the way Vance discussed the economy and immigration. Do you agree with that assessment?
That's a great assessment. I think it's right on. Look, the fact that we're even talking about policy specifically, or that viewers were able to have concrete answers on who did better on each individual policy, speaks to the fact that we could actually talk about policy last night. And there were real different visions put forward. And I think, if you spend a lot of time sort of teasing it out, they were accurate depictions for the most part of how each side would approach the policy realm. And so, I think that those are also the issues that those candidates own. I mean, in other words, the Democrats do better on abortion, and the Republicans tend to do better on immigration, and right now the economy.
Before we go, did anyone win?
I think if both sides should be happy this morning. I think if you were hoping that Walz would do a good job, he didn't have any huge blunders, and you're probably happy that he didn't step into anything. If you were hoping Vance won, look, he stayed out of trouble for the most part. He was able to pivot. He didn't always tell the truth, but he did it very differently than Donald Trump doesn't tell the truth, and I think that was appealing to a lot of people.
All right, Stephen Caliendo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We always appreciate the debrief, and we will be right back.